Chapter 1933. The next moment, Duque raised his hand, and a map that no one had seen except Tyrant appeared in front of them. It was a map of the ancient Kalimdor continent. In the ancient war, because of the explosion of the first well of eternity, the ancient Kalimdor continent was completely divided. The central part, with Azhara as the center, sank to the bottom of the endless sea. Duque slowly began to push the continental plates on the map. The two pieces on the right are the eastern kingdoms where most of the alliance countries are now. The one on the left is the current Kalimdor and the one on the top is Northrend. Then, what about the one at the bottom? The pupils of the alliance leaders and generals suddenly shrank. Land, rich land marked in green. Every leader knew the importance of territory. Even if the territory in Northrend could not be used for a while, it would always have a special value over time. For example, the mineral deposits mined there had begun to become a very important part of the Alliance's market. The farmers recruited by the Alliance had been planting all kinds of crops in the relatively mild climate of Northrend for several years in a row. Now that the Alliance's technology and transportation level were getting better and better, having a piece of fertile land was definitely a dream come true. All of a sudden, the breathing of the Alliance leaders quickened. Unfortunately, the next second, Duque dispelled their thoughts. This land has long had a master. It's just that in the past 10,000 years, the entire continent has been covered in thick fog. No ship dares to sail blindly in the thick fog, or the ship will be destroyed and the people will die. That's why this continent is not known to the world. Duque cleared his throat. Here, I would like to introduce the name of this continent to everyone, Pandaria. There are many intelligent races living on it, mainly Pandaren. So I hope that after you enter this continent, you will act cautiously and not violate the Alliance's policies. Then, we only need to wait for the tribe to enter the core area of this continent, and Gurus will bring the tribe into the deepest abyss of despair. With that, Duque began to introduce the situation of Pandaria in his memory to the core members of the Alliance. After the legendary battle in which the Titans defeated a group of ancient gods and elemental lords, ancient Kalimdor was in a state of chaos. At that time, the most intelligent creatures on the continent were the trolls. Later on, the trolls evolved into night elves, forming the Kaldorii Empire. 10,000 years ago, other than the two main races, the night elves and the trolls, there were actually several races in the southernmost part of the continent. For example, Fiend Gu and the Panda Man. It had to be said that the culture and history of Pandaria, in the eyes of a transmigrator like Duque, had a very Chinese style of story. It was something that had completely changed the style of the game. Duque himself felt that it was very out of character for a Western fantasy to turn into a Chinese fantasy. The world was just that wonderful, wasn't it? Approximately 11,000 to 10,000 years ago in the Dark Portal calendar, the Night Elves began to indulge in magic and even abuse it. After the Pandaran's advice was ignored, the alliance between the Kaldorii Empire and the Pandaren Empire was severed. After Xiao Hao became the emperor of the Pandaren, he discovered that the actions of the Night Elves would destroy the world. Then he and his partner, the Monkey King, began their ascetic journey to save Pandaria. After many years of hard work, Xiao Hao and the Monkey King, with the help of the four heavenly deities, discovered and sealed 6 of the negative emotions: doubt, despair, violence, hatred, anger, and fear, in the underground area near the temples of the four heavenly deities. However, they let go of the 7th negative emotion, pride. Then Xiao Hao gathered the elites of the country and established the Shadow Sect to be responsible for guarding the seal of the fiends. After the explosion of the Well of Eternity, which later generations called the Great Cataclysm, Xiao Hao ascended to the plentiful spring platform and cast spells according to the knowledge he obtained, causing the Pandaria continent south of Kalimdor to be surrounded by an impenetrable fog, preventing it from being destroyed by the explosion. Xiao Hao disappeared from then on and merged with Pandaria, becoming the last emperor of the Panda people. The area where the Thunder Throne was located became the Thunder God Island, which was also protected from destruction by this fog. The central area of the Zandala tribe relied on the help of powerful magic to survive the Great Cataclysm and became the Zandala Island. Every 5 years, the Zandala tribe would gather all the troll tribes in the world for a meeting to deal with various problems. They still had the power and prosperity of many troll tribes, but their strength was not as strong as before. After the end of the Pandaren Empire, the Goldfish people and Macaques also established a temporary dynasty, but it was quickly destroyed due to the betrayal of these two races. Since then, the Goldfish people and Macaques became enemies. The Shadow Sect gradually developed into the army of the Pandaren, and their responsibilities increased. They were responsible for defending the Coiled Dragon Ridge and helping the four heavenly gods and the Golden Lotus cult. After that, although the fiends still appeared from time to time with the wars between ancient fiends, the lizard men, macaques and goldfish people, the Shadow Sect could deal with them alone. Some of the Taurans who were nomadic hunters in the Pandaria area were trapped in the harsh environment of the Mantis Plateau after the Great Cataclysm. They gradually evolved into the wild Taurans and relied on plundering mantises and Pandaren to survive. They had conflicts with the Shadow Sect from time to time. On an island in the outer seas of Pandaria, the four heavenly gods and their believers built a huge trial field. The Pandaren came here to accept the trial and follow the path of the last emperor, Xiao Hao. There was also a wild Tauran clan living here. At some point, this island disappeared from its original position, and in the following thousands of years, it would randomly appear in the outer seas of Pandaria. It was called Eternal Island. The ancient fiend warlord, Gelsang, led his army to attack the territory of the Mantises. The ancient fiend's secret master, Hai Xin, invented a magic smoothbore cannon to deal with the flying mantises. However, the cunning advisor, Xue Xing, pretended to be the warlord's decree, so Hai Xin had no choice but to use the weapon before it was completely completed. The young mantis man, Kurluk, followed the others to attack the Great Wall and fought with Gelsang's army. His responsibility was to throw bombs at the ancient fiends from the sky. Kurluk was curious about the eagle's hunting method and constantly trained himself to imitate it, which was something that adult mantises could not do. The Caraxi Council noticed this and deliberately taught Kurluk a lot of knowledge. Kurluk decided to practice his skill of landing from the sky to attack the enemy, and was equipped with a pair of sharp blades. The ancient fiend's new cannon was very successful, and almost all the mantis flyers were wiped out except for Kurluk. He swooped into the ancient fiend's camp and started a massacre, destroying the weapon and killing Hai Xin. He was praised by the Empress and was given the name Windswept. Chapter 1934. Not long after, Kelruk once again charged into the ancient devil camp and began a massacre. Warlord Gelsang dealt with Xue Xing, who had forged the order. Advisor Fermin suggested that Gelsang use a divine artifact to cut off the connection between the Mantis Men and the Queen. It succeeded. The Mantis Man Queen was dead and everyone fell into despair. Fermin also created a large jar inlaid with flavonoids, which could be used to imprison souls. 6 days later, the desperate Caraxi prepared to awaken a hero, the summoner of blood Nurnak. The one who was awakened was Kelruk. Nurnak's ability was to influence the other Mantis Men, and with his superb strategic ability, he perfectly controlled the Mantis Men army to fight. Nurnak taught Kelruk a lot of history and battle strategy. They prepared to divert the ancient devil army, and then the two of them led a surprise attack to destroy the divine artifact. Although the ancient devils retreated in defeat, Warlord Gelsang hid in the large jar, and the Mantis Men could not kill him. After the two of them killed Fermin and snatched the divine artifact, Nurnak was killed by the arcane power contained within. Kelruk smashed the divine artifact into the arcane cannon, destroying it. The queen was finally saved. In the end, the Windstealer Kelruk also became a hero. He was sealed until the empire was in danger. The Door of Darkness started from about 3,000 to 2,700 years ago. The races living on Pandaria no longer understood the state of the other parts of Azeroth, and even thought that they had been destroyed. That was until the Pandaman Lu Lang rode on the back of the turtle god's son and left Pandaria to explore other parts of the world beyond the fog, becoming the first Pandaman explorer. The god's son returned once every 5 years. Over the years, more and more people joined Lu Lang's expedition team, and the god's son grew bigger and bigger, becoming a wandering island that roamed around the world. The Pandaman monks on the god's son island had 2 philosophies, the Earth-Water School and the Fire-Metal School. The leaders of these 2 schools were Aisha Cloudwalker and G. Firepalm. After Lu Lang's death, the god's son never returned to Pandaria, and the Pandaman living on his back cut off contact with Pandaria. Both sides thought that the other had been destroyed. The Door of Darkness started from 2700 to 26 years. Although the panda people who lived on the Lost Islands occasionally appeared in various parts of Azeroth, the other races knew very little about the panda people. Among them, the most active Pandaren explorer was Qin Stormlicker. In the original history, he had fought alongside the Horde in the war between the Kalimdor Alliance and the Horde in 22 years. On the Son of God, Lily Tempest Licker dreamed of becoming a traveler like Uncle Qin, so she started to keep a travel diary. First, it was about the adventures of her home, the Lost Island. Then Lily made up her mind to explore the whole world. On the Lost Island, Lily learned about the story between Lu Lang and Shenzhen through Chen's letter. After the Hungry Ghost Festival, Lily left the Lost Islands to explore the world and search for Uncle Chen. After experiencing a thrilling adventure that would even fill up to 500 words in the history books, Chen and Lily finally returned to the Lost Island. Recently, after the cataclysm caused by Deathwing, although the locals did not understand, the cataclysm still had an impact on the Pandaria continent, and Xiaohao's seal on Xia had also loosened. On the Lost Island, a missing Pandaren accidentally brought back the Pearl of Pandaria. Lily saw Pandaria from it and left the Lost Island, deciding to search for this continent. To protect Lily, Chen also left. In the original history, Lily came to the Iron Furnace Fort but did not receive any help. Chen found her, and the two went to Hidden Treasure Bay together. They participated in a battle between the Blackwater Bandits and the Bloodsail Pirates, and received help from the Kirin Tor mages. In the end, the Blackwater Bandits brought them to Gadget-san. Chen and Lily followed the Explorer Association's convoy to Oldham. In Ramcon, Torville was judging the Nephysites. Chen could not help a Nephysite repent. However, Torville still thanked them and gave them a boat to sail. Meanwhile, Chen and Lily were separated in a violent storm on the sea. The two were rescued by the Alliance and the Horde respectively. Then, they participated in a conflict on the sea between the Alliance and the Horde. A few days later, the two finally drifted to Pandaria. In this life, with Duque in charge, would they let go of a legendary Pandaren hero? As a veteran player, Duque definitely remembered how Blizzard Daddy introduced the monk class to all the players in the opening cinematic of Pandaria. The Great Horde General Nazgrin and Alliance General Taylor fought without any enemies. When faced with the legendary hero Chen Stormlicker, they were beaten up by Chen alone. Just like a father teaching his son a lesson, he did not have any temper at all. After Duque roughly introduced Pandaria to the entire Alliance military, Duque clapped his hands, and the door behind Taylor slowly opened. Duque's maid, Vanessa, led the two humanoid pandas into the room. Wow! Many people in the magic mirror exclaimed. There were so many intelligent races in the world that ordinary people would never have the chance to see in their entire lives. However, for such a cute, furry and intelligent creature with a burly build, it was a little magical. It should be said that many queens were so cute that they bled. Especially when they saw Lily, who was wearing red clothes and had curly braids of black hair. Kalia and Elugia were completely captivated. So cute. I want to hug her. Jaina calmed down a bit. Enough, sisters, don't scare her. As a traveler, Lily and her uncle Chen had seen the world. But they did not expect to receive such a high standard of treatment. As soon as they left the Lost Island and entered the Alliance, they were discovered by the Alliance's intelligence organization and reported. They were sent to Naxxramas as national treasures, national guests. Because the Alliance officials told them personally that the Alliance's commander, Duke Marcus, had the most detailed information on Pandaria. In fact, this was indeed the case. Before meeting General Taylor, Duque had a detailed discussion with the uncle and nephew. The content was mainly about Pandaria and Yashaji. In the archaeological relic Yogg-Saron's Box of Mysteries, it had said quietly, "In that sunken city he fell into a dream. In the land of Nyarosa there is only sleep. The god of drowning's heart is like black ice. Are you having the same dream again?" The seven-eyed black goat cast its bright gaze at us from the outside. The seven-eyed black goat referred to was the ancient god, Yashaji. Chapter 1935. Yashaji was an ancient god. According to Caraxi's legend, he devoured hope and released despair. What he breathed in was courage and what he breathed out was fear. In order to prevent the majority of mortals from thinking that it was just a legend, Caraxi also talked about the war between the Titans and the ancient gods, as well as the death of Yashaji. Yashaji's body was extremely large. This ancient god that stood above the earth had a body made of flesh and blood. On it were countless huge mouths that constantly opened and closed, as well as dark, cold eyes. At the beginning of the war between the Titans' creations and the ancient gods, the guardians of the pantheon gathered together and pointed the spear of justice at the Dark Empire ruled by Yashaji. Their first obstacle was the holy city around Yashaji, which was a fortress made of Yashaji's flesh and blood. The guardians firmly believed that as long as they completely overturned the largest Faceless One fortress in Azeroth, they could wipe out the enemy in one fell swoop. The guardians led the crowd to destroy wave after wave of Faceless Ones swarming like a tide, and then marched with difficulty toward Yashaji's mountain-like body. By the time they captured the holy city and launched an attack on the ancient gods, the scattered bodies of the Titans' creations and the Faceless Ones had already submerged the mountains and rivers. Yashaji was far more powerful than the Guardians imagined. The Titan's creation spirit was poisoned by him, and then they gave birth to fear and could no longer see a glimmer of hope. The Pantheon couldn't help but worry that their servants would be overturned in the claws of the ancient gods. Therefore they temporarily put aside the possible harm to the world and took a more direct action. The father of the Pantheon, the strongest Titan, Amun-Thul, used his body that was as large as the moon to break through the stormy skies of Azeroth. He used one hand to firmly grasp the writhing body of the ancient god. Immediately he pulled his sturdy arm and pulled the ancient god out of the world's surface in one fell swoop. Yashaji's gigantic body immediately disintegrated. His boundless body scattered in all directions, instantly shattering countless mountains. Even the creations of the hundreds of Pantheon guardians near Yashaji could not help but turn into ashes. Legend had it that Yashaji's last terrifying breath covered Pandaria and left a terrifying shadow on this land that could not be eradicated. These shadows were the current fiends. The ancient god Yashaji exhaled before his death formed 7 baleful auras. They were the baleful aura of fear, the baleful aura of madness, the baleful aura of anger, the baleful aura of doubt, the baleful aura of confusion, the baleful aura of hate, and the baleful aura of pride. They were born from the negative emotions and negative energy of humans. Fiendish demons existed on the Pandaria continent and could not be destroyed. After greeting Storm and his nephew, Duque officially announced the situation in Pandaria in front of the Alliance's higher-ups and generals. That's the way things are now. The Alliance and the Horde were in a state of war. The Horde is at an extreme disadvantage. I suspect that they were tempted by Yashaji's remnant will and set off for Pandaria before the fog covering Pandaria dissipated. Duque looked at Jen and reminded, "So I have to tell you, uncle and nephew, that your journey to find your homeland is actually a cruel war. The Alliance has a lot of reason to believe that the Horde will use the flames of war to ignite the Pandaria continent. Here, I can only promise you that the Alliance will not take the initiative to support any righteous or neutral race or faction." Duque changed the topic. "But the Alliance will not tolerate the Horde or the existence that has been eroded by Yashaji's evil power. If we have to use war to solve it, the Alliance will not be afraid to start a war with many parties." Although Tempest Liquor looked like a big-bellied panda, his intelligence was also not to be underestimated. Apart from the extremely powerful muscles contained in his fat, Jen's intelligence was also not to be underestimated. Duque's open and honest way of doing things immediately won his favor. In this life, because of Duque's existence, Jaina did not betray her father. Jen, who originally had a deep relationship with the Horde through the betrayal of her father, was only close friends with the few big bosses of the Horde, Sar, Wajin, and Rexer in this life. After all, it was Dalen Proudmoore's fleet that slaughtered the Darkspear Trolls village and flattened the entire island. In a rage, Old Chin followed Rexer and Wajin to attack Dalen's fleet. This kind of friendship that had been through life and death was completely different from the friendship of ordinary friends. Therefore, Old Chin did not have any grudges against the Alliance in this life. Instead, he felt that the powerful demigod and commander of the Alliance, Duque, was kind enough. The round-headed panda hero Old Chin nodded. "I'm glad that such a powerful world organization can still maintain such an upright and noble philosophy. I'm happy to be a witness to this scene. At the same time, I hope to help deal with Yashaji's malevolent aura." Old Chin left some leeway in his words. He was a witness, which meant that if the Alliance was vicious and just talked but not acted, or said one thing and did another, he did not rule out the possibility of defecting to the Horde that might be the messenger of justice. Duque smiled. "Thank you. Time will tell." In this regard he had absolute confidence. In fact, when he met Storm Spirits and his nephew yesterday, when Duque showed the remains of Thun and Yogg-Saron that were sealed by the Holy Light, the uncle and nephew were already 80% convinced. Old Chin's final caution was ultimately because Pandaria was the homeland of the Pandaren. It was not wrong to be somewhat vigilant against outsiders. This was what a legendary hero with rich knowledge and powerful strength would do. Old Chin was destined to not be able to escape. Duque had even reserved a position for him in the Alliance hero group. As for the trouble caused by Yashaji in Pandaria, Duque, who knew the history well, studied it for a long time and found that he really had no way to stop the fire of disaster from igniting. Yashaji was dead, but he caused trouble for thousands of years. As long as there was any war on Pandaria, it was bound to trigger a lot of negative emotions from the victims. Fear, madness, anger, doubt, confusion, hatred, pride, any kind of negative emotions accumulated would directly arouse malevolent aura. To deal with malevolent aura, the easiest way was to have no sorrow or joy. All the ethnic groups on the entire continent would be happy and harmonious. Everyone would sing songs and eat barbecue and spend every day. But was that possible? Even if there were no tribes, just the large number of demonkin, mantises, and Zandera trolls that remained were enough to cause trouble all day long. Regardless of whether the tribes in the alliance came or not, the Pandaria continent was a terrifying powder keg that would ignite at the slightest touch. Chapter 1936. Indeed, Duque felt that the current alliance definitely had the strength to wipe out the entire Pandaria. There would only be one result. The alliance would become the alliance of fear or father's enemy 3. If such a thing happened in the game, even Daddy Blizzard would not be able to stand it. Duque definitely knew the structure of the various races on Pandaria. Which idiots deserved to die and which fellows could be kept alive. The problem was that Comrade Old Chin, who was technically a native creature, did not even know. Yet, an outsider like Duque suddenly said that he was a charlatan and wanted to kill all the mantises on Pandaria. How would Old Chin look at him? Spoilers might be bad, but it was enough. Look, didn't people often say, spoilers are fun for a while, but the whole family goes to the crematorium? The Alliance was no longer the scum organization that still used wooden warships to fight to Pandaria in history. The more overwhelming the strength, the more humble and cautious they were. This was the bearing of a big country, a big organization. Okay, that's it for today. No one really knows what the situation on Pandaria is like for more than 2,000 years. I hope to send an elite delegation to enter Pandaria accompanied by Lily and Chin Tempest Liquor. Understand the situation first. It's best to have a diplomatic visit with the Pandaren and other neutral or righteous organizations to reach a consensus against the evil forces of Ashaka. This sentence was directed at everyone. The next sentence was for the military. According to Chin, Pandaria is a continent with complicated terrain. Under the premise that we can't use weapons of mass destruction, it's inevitable to enter ground and close combat. Based on this, please quickly formulate a battle plan for mountain warfare in the Alliance military. At this point, Duque's speech was actually fine. The next sentence was like taking off one's pants and farting. As for the Horde's warships, immediately send out pursuit troops to let as few Horde enter Pandaria as possible. Because the Horde will become a disaster. You, Duque, were the one who put those broken Horde ships into Pandaria. Now you're asking us to formulate a battle plan for fighting in the hills and forests? The Alliance generals wanted to beat someone up. Only General Taylor smiled bitterly. On the other side, Brainless Roar's army was quite miserable. For all the survivors, this was definitely a nightmarish escape. First, he bumped into the Alliance's patrol team. Then he was extremely lucky. He fired a few cannons randomly and took down 3 of the Alliance's flying ships in the middle of the night. After that, they engaged in a cannon battle with the Alliance's pursuing fleet and fought evenly. That would be strange. Looking over, Gurus felt that he still had a lot of fleets left. He had thought that once they were discovered by the Alliance, it would be good if only half of them remained. Who would have thought that there would be nearly 5/6 left? As they left the Alliance's absolute air defense circle, the captains of the Horde ships realized that something was wrong when they counted their losses. The losses were too great. Most aerial battles would result in the destruction of the ship and the death of the pilot. Why does it feel like if the ship is not destroyed, the people will die? He didn't feel it at night. In any case, there were screams and chaos everywhere. In order to not become a target in the dark, no one was allowed to light a fire unless the ship was on fire. Whatever pain you have, hold it in for me. Anyone who dared to light a fire to see if they were injured would jump off the airship. In the morning, most of the captains found that their ships had become a slaughterhouse. The Alliance seemed to be pursuing a high hit rate, so they used a large number of shrapnel bullets called 3-style bullets. These shrapnel bullets were the upgraded version of the grapeshot bullets from the gunpowder era. Their target was purely soft damage and they were aiming for human lives. For this sudden expedition, the Horde had gathered a large number of elite infantrymen. Almost every ship was stuffed like a can of sardines. It was completely crowded. Unless the captain insisted that no more people were allowed on board, the ship would crash. The commanders of the various Horde forced people in. As a result, facing the Alliance's shrapnel bullets, these Horde warriors who could easily fight 10 people in close combat, lost their lives just like that. After the Alliance's shells penetrated the armor of the Horde's warships, they quickly exploded, forming a sharp cone-shaped killing area like an ice cream bucket. All the Horde warriors in that area were shot into a hornet's nest. Even if they were alive, most of them were seriously injured, lying in pools of blood and moaning in pain. In order to avoid the cannons that repeatedly hit the side of the ship, Many airships crashed because the people inside all scrambled to the other side, causing the airship's propellers to lose balance and eventually crash. If the Horde had enough resources, they could give every elite Horde warrior a full set of armor, enough food and medical supplies. Armor. Even the fiercest orc warriors didn't like to wear full body armor. This made them extremely weak in front of shrapnel. And on a ship, who would wear heavy armor that weighed more than 100 pounds? Speaking of medicine, at the beginning of the apocalypse, after the Horde and the Alliance became enemies, the Horde's medicine supply was completely cut off. Other than the herbs that the shamans made themselves, it could be said that the injured Horde warriors could not receive any effective treatment. The apocalypse also destroyed the natural environment in most areas, which led to a further decrease in the supply of herbs. If it wasn't for the Horde's extremely barbaric tradition, injuries basically relied on self-healing. If self-healing failed, you deserved it. Other than a few cries from your loved ones, no one took it seriously. If it was the Alliance that had a large lack of medicine which led to an increase in casualties, they would have long exploded. The Fire of Heaven has 81 warriors that can still fight. The Mammoth has 219. Magatha, who was beside him, reported to Garush, which made the Great Chief very upset. The breakout plan was a success, but only a small part of it was successful. He had brought so many elites, but half of them died in the sky. This kind of *T made Garush go crazy. Great Chief, what about the wounded? On almost every ship, the wounded are several times more than the number of people who can still fight. Let the seriously injured people end their own lives. We are not weak dogs of the Alliance. A true Horde warrior, after suffering a fatal injury, will always find an enemy on the battlefield that can perish together with him. Garush roared angrily. His thunderous voice made everyone tremble with fear as they conveyed his orders. No one noticed that the violent aura in their Great Chief's eyes was spreading uncontrollably. Fear, madness, anger, doubt, confusion, hatred, and pride. 7 terrifying auras formed 2 small vortexes. In Garush's bloodshot eyes, they impressively replaced the most central pupil. Then a tragic scene occurred. The seriously injured orcs were ending their own lives. One by one, they were either forced or chose to jump from the side of the ship into the cold sea. Chapter 1937. The Black Dragon used her fingertips to control the fire elements to help Duque roast chicken wings. Vashj, on the other hand, held her cheeks and used the water element to control the front line. From another perspective, if the living resources were abundant, who would be willing to let their relatives and friends cut off their own lives? Duque hid in Naxxramas and still did not show his face in public. Unfortunately, as long as it was a livelihood, it needed strong economic support. At this time, not many people noticed that they had actually entered Pandaria and were beginning to be affected by Yashaji's murderous aura. It was normal for Vashj not to show up personally. Generally speaking, gods had their own style. Even demigods did not come out so easily. Beastmen were ruthless to others and also to their own people. This should be considered a subsidiary of a subsidiary. Although there were small islands scattered around the jadeite forest in the southwest, the altitude was lower. Other than those damn reefs, it was one of the few options for ships to reach Pandaria. It was late at night, there was no moonlight, and the visibility was frighteningly low. This was also amazing. Even if the route was deviated, it should go to the Mantis Plateau in the west, or the Beast Island in the north. Traditional beastmen would despise those cowards, who were injured and disabled on the battlefield but shamelessly lived on and occupied the clan's living resources. They contacted and helped the local Pandaren in the jadeite forest to remove the other party's control. The Pandaren of Sweet Dew Village and the Horde defeated the Alliance army in the north. The Pandaren of Morningwind Village and the Alliance defeated the Horde army in the south. The effects of the war began to appear. The Pandaren sent Zhu Talan to personally try to stop the war, but to no avail. Master, it's done. I sent Carathelis to negotiate. Now the Pearl-Finned Wraiths have agreed to join Master's water elemental army. Vashj smiled. In a situation where there was not enough food, the old and the weak were abandoned. This was a matter of course for traditional beastmen, but Sal could not accept it. In a sense, Sal's way of doing things in the Horde was not bad. Oh, it's really simple. It was an exaggeration to say that it was a song, but it was just a random humming. Just like the Alliance, all kinds of post-war bills and war bills implemented a social security system. It ensured the continuation of the bloodline of the soldiers who sacrificed themselves for the Alliance and the safety of their loved ones. That was why the soldiers were united and fearless of sacrifice. Now, with the 4 great elemental lords and the support of Fate's hands, the pearl-finned goldfish people in the jadeite forest were willing to join the alliance. They weren't even considered a subsidiary race because they relied on the subsidiary races of the alliance. Almost every tribe warrior threw the blame to the alliance. This clockwise turn from the northwest to the southwest was simply a crazy flight route. The most brain-dead thing was that the flight route actually passed right in front of Naxxramas, which was flying west. It was precisely because of the lack of survival resources that the tribe developed such a barbaric and violent tradition, not to raise trash. That was because they couldn't really enter the Pandaria region after reaching the shore. In the original history, the Alliance ship Heaven Seeker, which was escorting the tribal prisoners of war, had crashed on the back of the giant turtle, causing the giant turtle to almost be sucked into the giant whirlpool and self-destruct. Some of the Pandaren on the island joined the Alliance and the Horde under the leadership of the Water and Earth factions Monk Aisha Cloud Song and the Firegold factions G Firepalm. Their heroic self-destruction attracted sharks and other creatures in the sea. That kind of mournful mood triggered a further reaction. For example, during the second battle of the Dark Portal, the Orc warlock Necros, who helped the Dragonmaw clan chief Zuluhid control Alexstrasza, was despised by his clansmen and even the entire tribe because he was lame. The old had no one to rely on, and the young had no one to raise. He was in a good mood, humming a song as he ate the barbecue. "I'll just quietly watch you court death and I won't interrupt you. You're stupid and you're sending yourself to death." Duke, a guy who became a god as a mortal, was definitely an exception. Everyone knew that Duke never thought of himself as a high and mighty god. The surviving troops of the Alliance and the Horde set up military camps in the north and south of the jadeite forest, forcing the local Pandaren to work in preparation for the war. After asking, Duque didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Of course, there wouldn't be any Xuantian in this life. Suddenly, a secret communication was connected, and Jaina immediately said, "Not good. The Horde is in trouble." Several airships had crashed on the island of Disorientation, which was the body of the giant sea turtle Shenzhen. And one of the airships smashed into the big turtle's head. Shenzhen should have fainted. He seems to be drifting in the direction of the Great Maelstrom. As long as they didn't light up the lights, the Horde's airships, which relied on their vision to search for the enemy, would probably be able to maintain silence and fly within 3 kilometers without the Horde noticing. Bulang Bronzebeard looked at the dense dots on the radar, each of which represented a Horde airship. He couldn't help but complain, "Damn it. Getting rid of these Horde now is easier than killing wild ducks by the pond with an old-fashioned gun 100 years ago." Beside him, Vashj and Onyxia looked like they had been left out. What the hell? Under Brainless Roar's mysterious navigator, they first deviated east, then went straight south and finally made a miraculous turn west to land in the Jade Forest area. Normally, the shortest route from Orgrimmar to Pandaria should be to Thunder God Island in the northwest of the Pandaria continent. After Sal came to power, the situation was much better. Of course, for the sake of their great commander's plan, the Alliance had to order Naxxramas and the thousands of airships around it to move north. The mystery of Pandaria was a mystery because there were many incredible places on this continent. "Come on. For the end of the Horde," Jaina teased. This was equivalent to going in a big circle around Pandaria to reach their destination. "Brainless Roar, you idiot. You're driving King spaceship." Duque wanted to kill someone. Sometimes he also made things difficult for his subordinates. Yes, for the end of the Horde. At some point, hundreds of generals in the command center responded in unison. In the slave camp, Sal had seen too many tragedies. If it was a ship sailing on the sea, it really couldn't be said that the Horde was at fault. This was because the entire western, northwestern, and northern edges of the continent and islands of Pandaria were all steep stone walls that were hundreds of meters high. Without climbing tools, just reaching the shore was useless. Chapter 1938. First, the Alliance's flying ships had long since become all steel, powered by a diesel engine and a magic array anti-gravity system. Second, and most importantly, the naming method of the Alliance's warships had been monopolized by that bastard Duque. Duque rarely abused his power and wantonly named the Alliance's new warships after the Second World War ships on Earth. Except for the earliest Heavenbreaker, Duque monopolized all the naming rights for the new warships that followed. The dwarves and gnomes were also helpless. The glue rule was that whoever invented it named it. Although they were all flying ships, everyone knew that the new turbines, engines, power systems, and wind tunnel experiments on the hull construction of the second-generation pure diesel version of the flying warships were all done by Duque. Third, the latest version of the Alliance's flying warships, Even the old diesel flying warships that had not yet been retired were all equipped with anti-gravity emergency systems. Unless the hull was directly blown in half in mid-air, even if the power system was lost, the ship could still slowly descend after the emergency magic array was activated. To avoid the ship being destroyed and people dying, it was simply a sin. The tribal flying ships that had been wounded by the Alliance's Type 3 bombs and subcannons actually survived for more than 1,000 kilometers and crashed into the giant tortoise like dumplings falling into a pot near the Shenzhen. Duque's goal was to not destroy the ships even if people died. The effect was remarkable, but unfortunately there were side effects. Now it was clear that in order to escape, the tribe collectively made a large number of ships that could not withstand the emergency landing. When they saw a small island, they went to play crashing into the flying ships. Duque's mates had long been told that as long as Duque was not practicing swordsmanship inside, Storm and his nephew were to directly bring them in, so Vanessa opened the door. As soon as the door was opened, Duque heard the cries of the panda Lily Storm. "Big brother Duque, please save the lost island." Duque rushed to the secret monitoring room of Naxxramas with the two uncle and nephew as he promised. "Well, no problem, the Alliance will not sit back and watch a friend die." Old Chin was a panda man who had lived for a long time, and he did not believe such words at first. Then he thought of Duque's other identity, the demigod of Azeroth. Old Chin fell silent. No matter what, as long as there was a glimmer of hope, no one wanted their hometown to be destroyed. The monitoring room was not far from Duque's study. It was also a special space attached to the center of Naxxramas. Inside, Duque's other maid, Solarian, had already opened a series of magic mirrors. Originally, Duque could have done this in his study, but Duque wanted it to be more formal. Shenzhen might have a concussion. He's completely unconscious. According to the data sent by our scout ship, there seems to be a lump in its head caused by congestion. With Solarian's explanation, the uncle and nephew saw the head of their old home, the giant turtle, swollen to the size of a goose. Crack. Old Chin suddenly clenched his fists because he saw battles erupting everywhere on Shenzhen's back, which was the so-called Lost Island. In this day and age, there were still no high-powered optical magnifiers. If the Alliance's scout ships wanted to obtain a clearer optical image, they could only let Morningstar wizards risk releasing Magician's Eye ahead. This small eye made of arcane magic could fly to a distance of about 1 kilometer and observe the situation at a close distance. The image was a little blurry, but it could still be clearly seen. A group of burly green-skinned warriors were slaughtering the black and white Pandaren. It was not a battle, because Old Chin recognized at a glance that it was the Chihan winery he often went to. The bright red bamboo trees around seemed to have some magic, because their petals could maintain their former color for a few months after they were plucked. But at this moment they, along with the surrounding villages, were in a sea of fire. The ground was littered with the corpses of ordinary Pandaren. Orcs wielding battle axes were fighting the Pandaren from the Great Net Farm and Verdant Village, and even the warrior monks of Wuxian Temple. Seeing this scene, Duque almost laughed like a pig in his heart. He never thought that the tribe's intelligence would drop after following the brainless roar for so long. He didn't know if it was because they were provoked, but they actually attacked the Pandaren indiscriminately. This was a godlike assist to the Alliance. Old Chin gnawed on the bamboo leaf that he often held in his mouth. Duque knew that this old panda was most likely furious. His hometown was messed up by a group of people who used to be his friends. This feeling of betrayal was more annoying than a group of strange bandits suddenly coming to his door. Old Chin already had self-control not to go berserk on the spot. On the other side, Lily was crying non-stop. "Commander Marcus, do you have any good ideas?" Old Chin tried his best to make his voice sound calm. Duque, winner of the Azeroth Oscar, had a heavy expression on his face. "The tribe above is just a small problem. Later I will send a few fast airships. Old Chin, you will lead the Alliance's elites over, and they will soon be suppressed. The key is Shenzhen's coma." "Yes." Old Chin was still nervous. Lily, who was next to him, looked at Duque with a sorrowful expression. If Duque was a person overflowing with love like Kalia, he would probably immediately fall for that pair of watery black eyes. Duque didn't keep him in suspense and directly changed the topic. "Fortunately, the Alliance has experience in dealing with similar things. 30 years ago, I used almost the same trick to save the lives of 50,000 elite soldiers of Storm City." Duque snapped his fingers and Vashj, who had followed him in, immediately began to transform. A 6-armed Naga with a snake tail startled Old Chin and his nephew. Vashj crossed her 6 arms in front of her chest and bowed to Old Chin and his nephew. "I am Vashj, Master Marcus' maid." Currently, I am in charge of the tidal throne on behalf of Master. I command 200,000 Naga warriors and 2 million fishmen. The simple introduction caused Old Chen's heart to tremble. He had long heard that the alliance was amazing, with several demigods overseeing it. But he really didn't know that the alliance was so amazing. However, Vashj explained to Old Chen in a few words how Duke used a weak Murloc clan to drag a huge block of ice to save the people. After listening, Old Chen's blood surged and his heart thumped in his chest. As long as we can save the Lost Island, the Alliance will be a friend of the Pandaren forever. Old Chen solemnly declared. If Old Chen was the leader of the Pandaren, he would probably swear to let the Pandaren join the Alliance. Unfortunately, Old Chen was not. The official leader of the Pandaren was Xiaohao. The problem was that this Pandaren emperor, who had the same name as the mythical character from before Duque transmigrated, had been hanging for 10,000 years. Chapter 1939. In the ancient war, the Night Elves went overboard and attracted President Shaman to worship them like a god. In the end, they blew up the Well of Eternity in the ancient Kalimdor continent. The Pandaren Emperor, Emperor Xiaohao, calmly raised his staff in front of all the people and cast a spell. The entire Pandaria broke free from the main continent of Kalimdor, like a huge Noah's Ark, quietly and alone drifted into the depths of the sea. At the same time, a thick fog rose from the surrounding sea, carefully wrapping the entire Pandaria continent. From then on, Pandaria was hidden and no longer harassed by the outside world. Seeing that their home was finally saved, all the Pandaren couldn't hold back their excitement. They couldn't wait to cheer and celebrate. The entire Pandaria began to celebrate. Every Pandaren was jumping and laughing happily, celebrating their survival. Unexpectedly, just as the Panda people were celebrating, Emperor Xiaohao fell to the ground with a thud under everyone's watchful eyes. The emperor, who had worked his whole life to save his people, fell just like that and never got up again. Gradually, the emperor's entire body seemed to be disintegrated. Yes, he also turned into fog, lingering and becoming a part of the continent under the feet of his beloved people. This was the story of the last emperor of the Pandaren Empire. His legend had come to an end. The emperor was gone, and the Pandaren Empire collapsed. In a standard sense, the various Pandaren forces were actually independent. This was why Duque valued Old Chen so much. In a sense, according to the later development of history, Old Chen could barely be said to be the leader of the Pandaren. Because the activity of this uncle and nephew ran through the entire time node. Old Chen left. He sat on the high-speed battlecruiser, Scharnhorst, that Duque had specially prepared for him. She, her sister ship, Nizana, and several Z-series destroyers formed a high-speed commando team and rushed to the Lost Island at maximum speed. Following on the ship were the most elite Marines of the Alliance, as well as an elite squad of the Silverhand Knights led by the female dwarf paladin, Lena Thunderspear. Why Lena? Firstly, it was too exaggerated to send out a marshal of Gavin Rad's level for such a small-scale battle. Secondly, dwarves were naturally forthright, and it was easier for females to gain their approval than males. In the end, it was her. When Old Chen and his nephew rushed to the Lost Island, the battle was still going on. The arrival of the Alliance's flying battleship had also caused the Pandaren to panic and overreact. The Alliance's ships that had received Duque's warning were very smart. Their sorcerers created a huge holographic projection and projected Old Chen's image onto the bow of the Alliance's ships. On the way here, he asked Old Chen for the Panda Man's emblem. In just an hour, a bunch of temporary letterpress emblems were tied to every Alliance commando. They were tied to their arms and pauldrons to ensure that the Pandaren could see them from all angles. Old Chen even taught them Pandaren language. There was only one sentence. Old Chen asked us to help. The Pandaren on the Lost Island were overjoyed. Shinjinzi's back, the Lost Island, was a medium-sized island. In reality, the oval back of this ancient giant tortoise was about 4 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide. There were only a few thousand Pandaren living on it. Although many of the Pandaren monks were quite powerful, they were still powerless against more than 2,000 fully armed tribal elites who had fallen from nearly 10 airships. Before the airship could completely descend, Old Chen had already descended from the sky from a height of 50 meters. Before he landed, he leaped and swung his huge stick. Using the terrifying power of gravity to accelerate, he swung it diagonally and swept it horizontally. Bang, bang, bang. A total of 7 or 8 orc warriors, their burly bodies weighing more than 400 kilograms, were all swept away by Old Chen. Phew. Old Chen exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. Through the gap of his round hat that was missing a corner, his cold and angry eyes were revealed. He immediately spat out a mouthful of liquor, and the high alcohol content of Drunken Cloud turned into a fire breath spell when it came into contact with the flames. The two howling orc centurions who were charging at him turned into two human-shaped torches. Old Shen, tell everyone that the humans in golden armor are my helpers. Got it? Old Shen, who was dressed as a gardener, immediately understood. In the midst of the battle, a burst of shouts spread out. In the sky, the Alliance's airships did not fire their cannons. This distance was not suitable for parachuting, because it was too slow. Hundreds of ropes hung down from each airship. The Alliance Special Forces, who had been trained in high-altitude rope rapid descent, descended from the sky in armor. As soon as they landed, they directly fought with the orcs. Even if they were accidentally attacked by the Pandaren, they just grinned and said in unfamiliar Pandaren language, Old Shen found me. The entrance of the Alliance soldiers quickly eased the battle situation. More importantly, with the actions of the Alliance commandos, countless bubbles began to float on the surface of the sea. Thousands of murlocs swam over. These noisy murlocs, under the leadership of Naga, began to climb to the edge of Shinjinzi's turtle shell and threw the ropes over. The female Naga siren priest directly froze these ropes. 1, 2, 3. Pull. The murlocs worked hard and the Naga shouted. The Pandaren on the entire Lost Island could clearly feel that the Lost Island, which had begun to move in the direction of the Great Whirlpool, seemed to be breaking away from the suction of the Great Whirlpool. Occasionally, the Pandaren who were free ran to the shore and were surprised to see tens of thousands of murlocs trying to pull the Lost Island in the opposite direction. Not only the murlocs but in the direction of the Great Whirlpool, a huge fish-shaped monster floated to the surface. It pressed its forehead hard against the Lost Island, and a huge tail slapped the water hard trying to pull the Lost Island out. In addition to it, more water elements emerged from the bottom of the sea. They raised their thick arms and pushed the island hard. The battle on the Lost Islands was still ongoing. Half an hour later, the Alliance fleet arrived. Hundreds of airships threw down ropes, secured the island with the help of the Naga, and then pulled the island out of the Great Whirlpool at full power. An hour later, even Naxxramas arrived. This behemoth, which was no smaller than the Lost Island, played a vital role. Hundreds of thousands of energy beams swung down from Naxxramas and grabbed the edge of the Lost Island by itself. It took half an hour to drag and pull the unconscious Shinjinzi out of the dangerous waters. At this time, the battle on the island was over. More than 2,000 orc warriors were wiped out. Every corner of the island rang with the cheers of the Pandaren. Long live the Alliance. Chapter 1940. This was definitely an accident. Duque dared to swear that there was absolutely no such scene in the original history. He couldn't imagine how brainless the tribal warriors were to start a massacre as soon as they landed. This made something that could be said to be far-sighted happen. The Pandaren spontaneously praised the Alliance. Because not only did the Alliance send people to save their people according to Old Chen's request, but the Alliance also did the heroic deed of saving Shinjinzi. It was a miracle to drag an ancient giant tortoise that weighed 10,000 tons. The Pandaren of the Lost Island held a grand welcome ceremony for the arrival of the Alliance. There were red lanterns, firecrackers, couplets, and even lion and dragon dances everywhere. This made Duque, who had secretly come to the Lost Island, think that he had returned to the countryside of the Celestial Empire. That kind of ink painting of the countryside made Duque feel very comfortable. What surprised Duke the most was that the leaders of the Earth and Water faction and the Firegold faction, the two Pandaren sects that came from different eras, Aisha Cloudwalker and G Firepalm, both of them wanted to join the Alliance at the same time. That's right. They wanted to join the Alliance. Duque clearly remembered that Ji Huazhang of the Huazhang sect had directly joined the Horde in history. Why did they join the Alliance? Would there still be Pandaren in the Horde? With a shudder, Duque immediately came to a realization. No wonder the Huazhang sect made this choice. First, it was the Horde who attacked the Lost Island, and no matter how you looked at it, the Horde was evil, and the Alliance was simply the messenger of justice. Second, the Alliance looked more powerful. At first glance, it was obvious that the Alliance's warships were far superior to the Horde's level. The Alliance's Naxxramas and the Marine Race Army were completely showing their muscles. If they still foolishly joined the Horde at this time, then, what about the tribal warriors who were killed? Wasn't this what a certain transmigrator often heard in the Celestial Empire? 49 years to join Old Jiang. For fighters like the Pandaren, Duque would definitely accept them. The profession of warrior monks, even if it became a little awkward in the later stages, Their strength was neither strong nor weak, and their development prospects overlapped with other melee professions. But this was war, and the professions played the role of elites in war. They were not simply ordinary soldiers who were regarded as consumables by many generals, and there were no rigid requirements for logistics. Upon entering the elite level, the diversification of development would cause the enemy to be at a loss as to what to do. Speaking of which, how many people know that pandas are actually ferocious beasts? Soon, another piece of information attracted Duque's attention. After returning to Naxxramas and carefully examining the corpses of the Horde warriors, Chin said with certainty, "These orc warriors have a murderous aura." A baleful aura? Duque's system elf had indeed analyzed the aura of Yashaji, but Duque was surprised that Old Chin, a Pandaren who had never seen Yashaji before, was so sure. Not only Old Chin but even the big sister of the Earth and Water faction, Aisha, and the big shot of the Firegold faction, Ji Huozhang, came to the same conclusion. This must be an evil orc who had been instructed by Yashaji to head to Pandaria in order to resurrect Yashaji. This conclusion made the Alliance elders nervous. If it was just to beat up the Horde, the Alliance wouldn't care no matter how many Horde warriors there were. If the ancient gods were involved, then it would be a different matter. The two ancient gods who had already appeared could be said to be more formidable than the other. See, Thun had merely let the Karaj insectoids wreak havoc on half of the Kalimdor continent. Yogg-Saron had controlled the entire Order, and had almost controlled the 4 guardians, Garrican. A total of 5 guardians had been controlled. The Alliance had cooperated with the guardians many times and was well aware of their strength. At the level of the guardians, conventional weapons were completely ineffective. Cannonballs were just explosive reactions of the fire element to the guardians, plus flying items that were slightly faster. The high-level laws on the guardians directly ignored them. It was this kind of guardian that was tricked by a stupid dragon into 5. Since they were destined to be enemies, Duque also pretended to ask Tyrant, and then went to ask Tarim, the king of thunder and lightning, as well as Mimiron, to get a large number of books and records about the ancient gods. Tyrant had mainly obtained Elun's records. Tarim got first-hand information about the Guardians' battles. Everyone knew how huge Yashaji's body was and how terrifying its influence was. Hearing about the murderous aura, the most sensitive nerves in the hearts of the Alliance and Pandaren were touched. Under the discussion of the Pandaren and the big bosses of the Alliance, they quickly put the blame on the Horde. At first, Duque thought that this was slander because in history Braindead Roar didn't become the public enemy of Azeroth so quickly because of the murderous aura. Later on, Duque realized that he didn't even think of it. What was this about putting the blame on? Braindead Roar was really full of shit. What happened next was mostly in the direction of history. For example, the Zendala trolls who had stood on the side of the Alliance when the Alliance attacked Zul, Europe. William allowed the more rational faction of the trolls to continue to stay on their island in Stranglethorn Vale, acknowledging that it was the territory of the Zendala trolls. But the situation changed. After seeing the Alliance destroy Zwaman and Zul, Europe, the Zendala trolls had a different view of the Alliance. Some of the trolls believed that the Alliance would attack them sooner or later. In this situation, long before the Cataclysm, the prophet, Zul, predicted that Zendala Island would be destroyed by the Cataclysm led by the Wing of Death, but the King of Zendala turned a deaf ear. When Zendala Island was destroyed, the King of Zendala was powerless to stop it. This time, Zendala was determined to go all out for the continuation of the trolls. After a long period of obscurity, this time, Zendala put himself in a leadership position to lead all the trolls and fight for their survival. In any case, the wise men of Zendala were completely convinced by Zul at this moment. They believed that only war could prevent the extinction of the ancient race of trolls that had existed in this world since the creation of Azeroth. Most of the troll tribes were unified under the banner of Zendala rebuilding the glory of the Troll Empire, including the defeated forest trolls of Zwaman and the Gurubashi forest trolls that had split into countless scattered tribes all over Stranglethorn Vale. Stranglethorn Vale was very large and had a lot of caves. Even when the Alliance occupied the entire Stranglethorn Vale, there were still a large number of trolls hiding in the caves, struggling at death's door. It was under Zul's call that these trolls all rushed out and attacked many of the Alliance's civilian ports. They used old-fashioned wooden warships to form a large but not powerful fleet, preventing the destruction of Zendala. And Duque took advantage of this. Chapter 1941. The Alliance in Azeroth had long been modified by Duque to the point where it was almost unrecognizable. Before the Cataclysm, the Alliance had a strict radar warning system. Especially on the west coast of the Eastern Kingdom, where humans and dwarves were the majority, there was a radar station every 100 kilometers. Each radar station was stationed with at least one company of soldiers with 3 griffins or hippogriffs. There were also coastal patrols 3 times a day. If the Alliance could discover the Horde's flying fleet, how could they not discover the Zendala trolls? William had suggested to Duque if they should strike first. Duque shrugged. Why should we stop them from leaving the Eastern Kingdom? Is it because there are too many soldiers in Stormwind and they like to play with trolls all over Stranglethorn Vale? If they leave, there will be one less problem. When the time comes, we will have an excuse to intervene in Pandaria. Stranglethorn Vale was thousands of kilometers from north to south. Even the Karaji bugmen were a huge problem. It was impossible to kill all the trolls in the underground space that was similar to stalactites. Now that they had come out to die, it couldn't be better. Sure enough, Duque's personal thief, Edwin Van Cleef, quickly sent back news that Zendala's boss, Zul, had decided to ally with Zendala's ancient ally, the Ancient Devils. Thus, Zendala was on the opposite side of the alliance for the first time. The Ancient Devils gathered under the leadership of the weapons master, Theon, and planned to take advantage of the chaos to regain control of Pandaria. At this time, the main force of Pandaria transported by the Horde's airship began to set up military camps in the south of Jade Forest, forcing the local Pandaren to work in preparation for the war. Gurus used violence to enslave the Pandaren of Sweet Dew Village and began a massacre, wiping out the Pandaren of Morning Breeze Village. Taking advantage of the conflict between the macaques and the goldfish people, they joined forces with the macaques to attack the Pearl Fin goldfish people's territory. They didn't expect the alliance to make a move first. The silly macaques ran to Pearl Fin village and were ambushed by the goldfish people and Naga. But the war also caused the influence of Fiend to appear. The Pandaran's boss, Zhu Talon, personally tried to stop the war but to no avail. At this time, a Dragonmaw clan beastman who had been liberated by Sal from the shelter, Kirk, was on his way to Pandaria when his spaceship crashed on the coast of the Jadeite forest. The spacecraft crashed into an auspicious dragon in the clouds. The mother dragon died to protect the young dragon and entrusted the young dragon to Kirk. One man and one dragon struggled to survive on the coast of Pandaria. Kirk decided to hand the dragon over to the Cloud Dragon Knights. However, Pandaman Elder Only urged him to stay and asked him to raise this young dragon. He agreed and decided to let the Flying Dragon tribe listen to her and become a real dragon throat orc. However, his philosophy conflicted with the Pandaren of the Knights. Due to his injuries, the training did not go well. Later, the Horde's General Nazgrin personally led the Horde's army to attack the Pearl Fin's village. This time he was almost dragged into the water by Vasht's subordinate, the Deepwater Lord Caratheris, to teach him how to reincarnate as a murloc. The tribe suffered a great loss and nearly 5,000 orc warriors died. However, this intense battle had freed all the baleful auras from their seals. During this period, the Pandaman wanderer Zhozhua came into contact with the Horde. He was still searching for the ancient prophecy, but he could not prevent the outbreak of war and the release of the baleful auras. The baleful aura of doubt raided the Green Dragon Temple, corrupting and slaughtering a large number of Pandaman monks. The baleful aura of despair occupied the Vermilion Bird Temple. The baleful aura of fear broke the seal and escaped from the cave where the Mantis people were hiding and invaded the palace of the Mantis People Empire. The great Empress Shakhil and her subjects were controlled, and the Centennial Reincarnation War broke out 10 years earlier. The Mantis army attacked the Great Wall, and the Bison were forced to break through the Black Bull Pass and escape into the pass. The baleful aura of anger escaped from the Shadowpan Monastery and took control of the Bison who had lost their homes. The cavalry army burned and plundered the Pandaman village in Kunlai Mountain, causing heavy casualties among the people. The baleful aura of violence and hatred started a war in the Shadowpan Monastery, and the main force of the Shadow Trace sect suffered heavy casualties. At this time, Old Chin had already entered Pandaria with some of the elites of the Lost Island. He was lobbying various forces to accept the alliance. Duque promised Old Chin that after more than half of the Panda men in Pandaria agreed to let the alliance enter Pandaria, the alliance's fleet would enter this continent and destroy those evil races and existences. Naxxramas and the alliance's fleet were hovering over the sea 30 kilometers northeast of the giant beast island in the north of Pandaria, which happened to be a position that all Pandarians could not see with their eyes. More alliance fleets were gathering at sea and began to gather on the open sea between Storm Port and New Kultira's port. As the two large fleets were too large to be accommodated by the port, they could only anchor near the coast and wait for instructions from the alliance's military headquarters. Duque continued to drink tea in the secret room of Naxxramas. Well, this tea from the Lost Island is really good. This is the legendary Longjing before the Ming Dynasty. Duque made tea for Jaina with familiarity. Jaina blinked her beautiful eyes. Hey. Duke, don't tell me you've been to the Lost Islands before? You're so familiar with it? Hee hee. How is that possible? The panda men on the Lost Islands said that they had not seen any intelligent creatures other than panda men in the last 10,000 years. Duque laughed. Ah. He almost accidentally exposed his identity as a celestial. Forget it. As your wife, I have an obligation to keep your secret. But if you don't say it, I won't ask. You have too many secrets. Jaina rolled her eyes at Duque. Is it okay for the Alliance to just wait like this? Our daily consumption of food and fuel is skyrocketing. Duque shrugged. That's why I didn't mobilize everyone. Jaina was speechless. Although the Alliance was aggressive and had encircled the Horde on all fronts in Kalimdor, it was actually not an all-out war. Most of the officers and soldiers reported and stayed in the military camps of the various countries, stepping up their training and preparing to attack at any time. In fact, there was really no need for the millions of soldiers, reserves, and militia. The active army at the front line was only 100,000 infantry and less than 1,000 airships. In total, there were only 300,000 people. In addition, there were the Karakis, which were free troops. The cost of fuel was very low because it was mainly needed by the army. The airships used elemental energy sent over by the magic net, which also didn't need money. The real headache was the food and drink of these troops, as well as the artillery ammunition that was about to expire. Compared to the enthusiastic donations of the Alliance, it was like a drizzle. Duque pointed at the crisscrossed map of power on Pandaria. I'm dragging this out to make some space in Pandaria. Pandaria is too crowded now. Chapter 1942. A chess player's basic skill was to watch at least 3 moves before taking a step. Good chess players could even see the next 10 moves of their opponent. Others who met Pandaria might say, wow, it's a whole new continent. Can we colonize it? Is there a new territory? Duque was thinking about how to fight the Burning Legion if they came. At present, the Alliance had completed or basically completed their military deployment in the Eastern Kingdom, Kalimdor, and Northrend. When the Legion was ready, they would be snowballed by the demons if they weren't careful when facing the Burning Legion spaceships dropping from the sky. They did not care about the spaceship that had just landed. In a while, the Eridar warlocks would directly open the teleportation door and send more void distortion demons over. More Eridar warlocks arrived, and they immediately opened more teleportation gates. 1 hour they might only have to face hundreds of demons. If they didn't do anything for a day, the number might soar to 10,000. Anyway, there were billions of demons in the twisting nether. They would resurrect after being killed and run back to their corpses. The only thing stopping the demons from invading was the size of the portals, which was the number of troops sent out per unit of time. The Azeroth in reality wasn't as small as it was in the game. In the Elven Forest in the game, it would take 10 minutes at most to run from the westernmost to the easternmost on a horse. In reality, the Elven Forest was about 100 kilometers from north to south and 300 kilometers from east to west. It was also a forest with complicated terrain. People and horses had to be changed, and it would take a whole day to send a message. With such a vast area, if they were still as backward as in history, they could only rely on griffins to find it. Most of the troops had to rely on the 4 legs of horses to run. By the time they arrived, it would be too late. If Duque was given another 10 years, Duque was confident that the 3 continents would be able to hold on. At least they wouldn't collapse. When they reached Pandaria, there wouldn't be any empty space without a major operation. Of course, Duque knew that the devilish ancients, mantis men, and Zandala trolls weren't good people. The Alliance couldn't just start a massacre, right? Anyway, they were strong and had a lot of capital. The Alliance just quietly pretended to be cool and waited for the Horde and the evil races on Pandaria to die. In the following days, all kinds of information continued to come. Just like in history, Zandala successfully revived the first emperor of the ancient devils, the Thunder God, on the Island of Reckoning. The Zandala army was still overcast. They had found the ancient Devil Mountain's treasury and wanted to steal the powerful treasures inside. In the end, most of the Shadowpan monastery fell into the hands of the evil. Even the sect master Zhu Talon was controlled by the evil of hatred. Only Master Shuelyo and his disciples managed to restrain the threat of the evil of violence. Because the Alliance had Old Chin take action, and with the help of Lena Lightspear and the other second-rate experts of the Alliance, the Shadow Trace sect was able to purge the fiend's influence from the outside in. Zhu Talan was also freed from the fiend's control. After a short rest, Zhu Talan finally realized that the situation in Pandaria was completely out of control. The Shadow Trace sect was an organization founded 10,000 years ago by the last emperor, Xiao Hao, who had gathered a group of top-notch experts. They wandered in the shadow of Pandaria, fulfilling their mission of guarding the fiends. As the current leader of the Shadow Trace faction, Zhu Talan carried a heavy burden on his shoulders. He commanded all the warriors of the Shadow Trace faction and fought together with them to protect Pandaria from the invasion of outsiders. In a sense, he was the biggest obstacle in the Alliance's control of Pandaria. After all, in the eyes of the Pandaren, be it the Alliance or the Horde, they were all outsiders. Entering Pandaria without permission was the greatest provocation to the entire Pandaren race. It was a declaration of war. But the appearance of Old Qin and a group of Alliance elites made Zhu Talan see something different. Old Qin, is the Alliance you speak of really so scrupulously abiding by the rules that they won't step into Pandaria without the consent of more than half of the Pandaren leaders? Old Qin chewed on the bamboo in his mouth and repeated what happened on the Lost Island. First of all, I have to admit that this interracial organization called the Alliance is 10,000 times stronger than we imagined. Secondly, they are the enemies of the orcs who slaughtered in the Jadeite forest. I heard that the evil orcs provoked a war against the Alliance. Since they couldn't beat the Alliance, they were most likely tempted by Yashaji and came to Pandaria to seek Yashaji's power. The most important thing is that the Alliance and the ancient gods are mortal enemies. They have already killed 2 ancient gods. I've seen the remains of the ancient gods with my own eyes, and I've felt the evil that hasn't faded from the Holy Light Seal. Moreover, the Alliance respects us Pandaren very much because we guard Yashaji's remaining Shah. I think we're on the same page as the Alliance. Also, including their commander, Duke Marcus, the Alliance has many demigods. Zhu Talan was tempted. It was true that the Shadow Trace faction was the strongest evil suppression organization. At the same time, the Shadow Trace faction was also proud. They had been around for 10,000 years, waiting for the day when Yashaji came out. If not for this experience where even their leader was tricked, the Shadow Trace faction probably wouldn't let outsiders intervene, let alone an alliance dominated by humans. They were completely outsiders. Yashaji's spirit was terrifying. They had personally experienced it. The organizations suppressing Shah all over Pandaria began to collapse, and the main force of the Shadow Trace faction also suffered heavy losses. In such a situation, no matter how stubborn Zhu Talan was, he realized that the Shadow Trace faction alone, or even the entire Pandaren, couldn't suppress Shah and cause trouble all over the continent. When the Zendala trolls, Demonkin ancients, Mantis men, and the Horde joined forces, it might be the end of the Pandaren. The Pandaren were more homebodies, not eccentric and peace-loving, but they weren't stupid. They wouldn't sit still and wait for death. It was rare that such a powerful alliance was so polite and principled. It was really to the liking of the Pandaren, who regarded themselves as a race of etiquette. Thinking of this, Zhu Talan made a decision. Old Qin, please introduce me to Marcus, the leader of the alliance you mentioned. I want to verify with my own eyes whether he and his alliance will help the Pandaren's future. Okay, no problem. Their people are here. They have a special way to contact us. Old Qin immediately found Lena Thunderspear. Lena immediately raised her wrist and pressed her right hand on the bracer with a special gesture. Silverhand 10086 calling 9527. Please answer if you copy. A second later, a crisp female voice came from the bracer. 9527 copy. Please speak. For the Pandaren, who respected tradition and relied on shouting to pass messages, and only rode the soaring dragon in emergencies, instant messaging was simply nonsense. After Lena finished speaking, another voice answered, "May I ask if Sect Master Zhu wants a quick meeting or an immediate one?" Ha. Chapter 1943. This time it wasn't just the voice. An illusory, translucent human female head popped out, giving Zhu Talan a fright. The other party spoke half-baked Pandaren language. I thought you were a human." Zhu Talan looked at the short and fat Lena. "Sorry? I'm a female dwarf. In the Alliance, humans are the most populous race," Lena said, a little annoyed. "Hello, I'm Sally Whitemane, one of the bishops of the Holy Light Church in the Alliance." Sally smiled. Zhu Talan started talking to the white-haired human girl wearing a red, gold-rimmed hat. "What's with fast? So what if it's fast? If it's fast, you can come on a flying mount. We'll have special flying knights to lead the way. It'll take about half a day to get here. Or we can send flying warships. That'll be faster. If it's fast, we'll open a portal here and you'll be able to reach our flying fortress immediately. There were so many proper terms and Zhu Talon was dumbfounded. Teleportation portal? Do you know magic too? And don't portals only lead to a fixed place in the wild? Almost as soon as he finished speaking, Sally smiled. We can give you a demonstration. Okay. The next second, a portal opened precisely 2 meters in front of Zhu Talon. Zhu Talon couldn't help but swallow his saliva when he saw the completely different scenery inside the oval portal with a psychedelic purple-blue halo. On the other side of the portal was a group of smiling human guards who were not armed. Zhu Talon was the leader of the Shadow Trace faction, and his position among the Pandaren was extraordinary. Unfortunately, Pandaren were a very traditional race like the Celestial Empire in the 19th century. For 10,000 years, Pandaren's lifestyle and technology had been almost stagnant. But the Pandaren didn't only have monks. They also had quite a few magic professions such as mages, priests and shamans. The magic civilization of Pandaren wasn't particularly powerful, but they still had portals, just not as exaggerated as the ones in the Alliance. Now, the core members of the Alliance, such as the elite warriors, would carry a spatial coordinate with them at all times. With the help of the weave, any Radiant Moon wizard could open a teleportation gate from any place the weave could reach. While Dumuk had been rotting outside Pandaria for so many days, the shameless demigod of the weave had already spread his evil claws all over Pandaria, which was the weave nodes. However, Duque was very careful and did not recklessly lay down the weave. Moreover, they were closely monitoring every node. After all, he did not know what was going on with the baleful aura. Legend had it that it was a great killing weapon that could kill a large group of Titan Guardians. There was no cure for a morbid life. If Yashaji's baleful aura infected Duque's weave, that would be hilarious. Imagine a large group of Alliance heroes such as Tyrion Fordring kneeling on the ground in an ORZ pose and saying, "I'm a pile of shit, let me shit." Duque would definitely feel that the world was hopeless. Now, a teleportation gate had already subdued Zhu Talon. If Sect Master Zhu doesn't think it's safe, you can always ride a flying mount. Sally slyly tried to provoke Zhu Talon. If it were a man, it would be a standard mockery. If it were a woman, it would be a proper provocation. Are you afraid? Come if you're not. What are you afraid of? Sure enough, after being provoked, Zhu Talon strode through the teleportation gate with his 2 deputies and Old Chin. As soon as they arrived, they immediately saw a handsome young man waiting at the door. "Hello, I'm the son of Varian Rin, the king of Stormwind City and the deputy commander of the Alliance. My name is Anduin Rin. Please come with me. The commander is already waiting for you, Lord Rin." Little Anduin was not the famous dirty priest, who would shamelessly use a mass resurrection spell in battle. He was now just a novice priest. His innocent smile was very pleasing to the eye, and he easily won Zhu Talon's favor. Little Anduin took Zhu Talon and Old Chin in a small circle, passing through the port of Naxxramas. Zhu Talon was deeply shaken. Although the Alliance now had specialized supply ships to resupply the fleets floating outside Naxxramas, and even developed floating docks for maintenance purposes, the ships of the Alliance would still return to the port regularly. After all, the soldiers could only rest better when they returned to the port. The real overhaul of the ships could only be carried out in the port. Hundreds of battleships were docked in the huge square docks. From time to time, battleships over 200 meters long would enter and leave the port on a designated route. Tens of thousands of people were busy at the port, and from time to time, large trucks would drag large boxes to resupply the battleships. This futuristic scene was definitely beyond Zhu Talon's imagination. It was like the first time the humans in front of the Door of Darkness saw the creation of the Titans. The feeling was indescribable. Is this the supreme force of the Alliance? Zhu Talon's voice was trembling. Not to mention him, even Old Chin, who had come to Naxxramas for the second time, was shocked by this scene. That's not it. Our commander, Duke Marcus, is a demigod of the weave. He rules the 4 elemental realms of Azeroth. He is the elemental lord of the land of fire and the throne of tides. The master of the throne of the wind god is another leader of the Alliance, Sylvanas Windrunner of the elven kingdom of Sindorii. As for the Stonewall continent, Therazane, the mother of Stonewall, has already submitted to Commander Marcus, little Anduin said seriously. It was his undisguised youthful innocence that shocked people the most when he said these words in a matter-of-fact tone. Zhu Talon wanted to find a flaw in his words, but he was surprised to find that when little Anduin said these words, the Alliance guards beside him all puffed out their chests with pride. Zhu Talon sucked in a breath of cold air. He was extremely glad that the alliance was not an enemy, nor had they come with hostility. Compared to the alliance, the horde warriors who relied on axes were nothing. Finally, in the secret chamber, Zhu Talon saw the alliance commander, Duque. "Welcome, welcome." Zhu Talon was stunned. The people who welcomed him all spoke half-baked Pandaren language. Duque was actually fluent in Pandaren. The common language in Pandaria was Pandarian, but the Pandaren had their own way of speaking, which was like an accent. Hearing Duque's pure accent, Zhu Talon felt a deep sense of respect. Chapter 1944. Not to mention Zhu Talon, even Ol Chen's eyes bulged out of their sockets. He was completely stunned. For the Panda people, the humans in the world of Azeroth were the standard foreigners. Foreigners speaking half-baked Panda language was already a great respect for the Panda people. In the human-led alliance, these foreign races were so powerful, and they were so respectful to them. That was a great honor. Zhu Talon was flattered that Duque could speak the Panda language so fluently. But could he blame Duque for this? Damn it, Duque did not know what was wrong with this Azeroth. Pandarian was Chinese. And Panda language was Mandarin with a Sichuan flavor. In fact, when Duque first heard Ol Chen and Lily talking, he was dumbfounded. But his experience meant that he was not born with the magical Pandarian language. After all, everyone knew that he was from Stormwind. Duque had been having a hard time holding back these days. He could only propose after meeting Ol Chen in the alliance that all the higher-ups, or at least the officers who were about to go to Pandaria, had to learn Chinese Pandarian. Speaking of which, isn't this normal? The Panda people's elected leader was Emperor Xiaohao, who died 10,000 years ago. In the eyes of the Chinese, which foreign devil's name would be Xiaohao? Was it the distortion of time and space? Or the loss of moral integrity? Duque did not know. Anyway, he had a reasonable reason to teach the entire alliance to learn Chinese. Duque was very happy. Otherwise, if there was no suitable reason, people would think that Duque was promoting the demon language if he forced the promotion of the Chinese language. It was because of the Panda people like Ol Chen and Lily, who had traveled the Eastern Kingdom's mainland and could speak both human and Pandarian as teachers, and Duque had pointed out the importance of Pandarian, that the alliance had a craze for learning Chinese. Zhu Talon seemed to think that Duque was just trying to coax him. He didn't think too much about it at first, so he casually complimented him. "You speak the Pandaren language very well, Commander. Thank you for the trouble." Duque replied naturally, "Not at all, not at all." This was courtesy, but courtesy also had a fixed form and one had to pay attention to the tone. If it was used incorrectly, it could cause a misunderstanding or make people laugh to death. For example, a very simple, "thank you." Usually it was polite to say, "thank you," when someone helped you. If the other party killed your entire family and you coldly said, "thank you," that would be sarcasm and it would represent a monstrous hatred. Unwilling to give up, Zhu Talon exchanged a few more pleasantries. Who would have thought that Du Muk could answer so fluently? Zhu Talon, Chen and Lili's eyes widened. Duque pretended to be smart. "What? Are you so surprised that I learned Pandarian? I am the most intelligent mage in the Alliance." There are so many races in the Alliance. Although everyone learns the common language as the official language as the commander, I know the common language, Dwarven language, Quell, Dorii language, Kaldorii language, Drenii language, and even Titan language. I also know Eridar, which we call the demonic language. Oh. It turned out that this intelligent commander of the Alliance was also a master of languages. The three Pandaren suddenly came to a realization, and their eyes were filled with admiration. So, even as a Chinese, he could be so awesome in a different world. There was no one else like him. Du Muk laughed sinisterly in his heart. "Sorry. Apart from the so-called Pandaren language, all my languages come with translation software." The discussion between the two sides suddenly became very friendly. Zhu first said that he hoped that the Pandaran's territorial sovereignty would not be violated by the Alliance, and that their race and customs would be respected. Duque immediately said that the Alliance respected the territorial integrity and racial status of every member country and independent race. The Alliance was willing to invite the Pandaren into the pit as a member country, not as a vassal race or organization. To join the Alliance. Zhu also said that he hoped the Alliance would swear in the form of an oath that they would not kill neutral forces and races at will. Duque immediately said that the Alliance agreed. The Alliance would not kill the innocent. Look, the bugmen who used to hang out with Si Thun were now the Alliance's underlings. Only the stubborn races and believers who firmly supported the evil gods would be eliminated by the Alliance. In fact, up to this point Zhu was already very satisfied. Finally he vaguely asked what the Alliance thought of the Mantis Men, the Ancient Devils, and the Wild Oxmen. Duque sighed. I heard that there is a saying in Pandaria that things should not happen more than 3 times. The first time the Alliance can consider it a mistake. As long as it does not cause major losses to the Alliance can tolerate mistakes, but the Alliance will be extremely vigilant. The second time the Alliance will punish them severely no matter what. If there is a third time. Duque didn't say anything and directly made a chopping gesture with his hand. Don't underestimate this gesture. If an ordinary person made this gesture, it would at most be a threat. However, Duque made this gesture as the strongest demigod and the commander of the Alliance, which meant that no matter how many people there were or what the status of the other party was, he would kill them all. However, this approach was in line with the Pandarin's way of moderation. Don't cause trouble, don't be afraid of trouble. Equality, universal love, and responsibility. Zhu Talon felt that he had made the right decision this time. On the basis of equality and mutual benefit, Zhu Talon and Duque discussed and signed a series of letters of intent. Of course, this would only be officially signed after Zhu Talon helped to persuade the other Pandaren organizations and obtain the agreement of half of them. On the other hand, under Duque's clever guidance, Zhu Talon also agreed not to interfere with the Alliance's fight against the Zandalar trolls. In fact, the grudge between the Alliance and the trolls was a bad one. Because when the High Elves came east and arrived at the Long Song Forest, they actually seized the territory of the Amani trolls. If they insisted on this point, the Alliance would be the one in the wrong. Duque used diplomatic language to point out that the Night Elves used to be the trolls. The atmosphere suddenly changed and it suddenly became a civil war. Given the Pandarin's character, they definitely didn't want to get involved. The key was that Duque pointed out that when Ragnaros and the ancient gods were stirring up trouble, the trolls took the opportunity to stab them in the back. Zhu Talon didn't like these trolls at that time. The Zandalar trolls had now recruited the Amani and Gurubashi trolls, but these trolls used to believe in evil gods. The Amani loved torturing and killing animals, imprisoning the souls of animals that were close to demigod level and integrating them into their bodies to gain power. The Gurubashi worshipped the evil god Hacker and loved blood sacrifices. Moreover, the Zandalar had become a traitor. First, it helped the Alliance deal with Hacker and now it actually betrayed them. It gathered the trolls, attacked human ports, killed people, robbed human ships and ran away. This was a classic case of betraying one's own people and then using the enemy's hand to annex the other races. In turn, it turned around and abandoned its former ally. Chapter 1945. The Zandalas had their own reasons for doing all this. At first, it was because Gurubashi and his bastard compatriots had gone too far. Later, they did rise up because they were afraid of the Alliance's persecution. But after Duque revealed so many facts, he inadvertently induced Zhu Talon's thoughts. Duque was not afraid that Zhu Talon would send people to investigate, because what Duque said was the truth. Of course some things. A grass grows 3 feet high on Zujin's grave, and Zwaman has become a magic testing ground for blood elf mages. Would I say such things? Gurub has now become a heavy industrial base in Stormwind. The gold mine in Stranglethorn Vale has been exploited by the Marcus family and used as a gold reserve for Duque's little treasury. A certain black dragon has also slept there and become a warehouse manager. The iron ore has been mined and smelted on the spot. It's a one-stop operation to produce flying warships, tanks and armored vehicles. Such a trivial matter was not even worth mentioning. Who the hell told you to believe in evil and stab us in the back? You deserve to be confiscated. There was nothing wrong with this logic. As a leader-level figure who paid attention to his own race, Zhu Talon was undoubtedly qualified. Unfortunately, his lack of knowledge led to a lack of breadth of thinking. Besides, he could not care less about races other than Pandaren. Just like that, Zhu Talon and Old Chin left happily. They would contact the various Pandaren organizations next. Of course, this would definitely take time. This allowed Duque's overt plot to continue. Because the Horde's elites led by Brainless Roar were still attacking Pandaria like a raging fire. The more ferocious the Horde's attacks, the faster the Pandaran's integration. In the original history, both the Alliance and the Horde were looking for a powerful force to win the war. In the Splendid Valley, despite the objections of others, Gurus firmly believed that the Horde should use the power of Shah to deal with the Alliance. After a discussion among the leaders of the Alliance, they decided not to use the power of Shah. In this life it was not so troublesome. Only the Horde led by Brainless Roar was panicking. The Alliance? Now the Alliance was a righteous organization that had successively defeated 2 ancient gods, destroyed the Scourge army, and fought against the Armageddon army. They had double-digit demigods, thousands of flying warships, tens of thousands of ships on the sea, hundreds of thousands of tanks, armored vehicles, and all kinds of cannons, as well as millions of conventional forces. With this level of strength, would he still need to take the unorthodox path? Great Chieftain Garush gave the order to search for a powerful ancient devil-race divine artifact, the Sacred Bell. In Kunlai Peak, it was supposed to be an exciting showdown between scheming and counter-scheming. This time, under Duque's signal, the Alliance did not interfere, and as a result, the tribe succeeded easily. It was just that Du Muk had pretended to send an elite team led by Brigid Abendis to help an ancient hero in the name of resisting the power of the Holy Bell, the Monkey King of the Macaques from 10,000 years ago. Brigid passed the Monkey King's trial and obtained the Hammer of Harmony. It was created by the Pandaren and could resist the power of the Holy Bell. Garush led the elites to the ancient Devil Mountain Terrace in Kunlai Mountain, preparing to use the Holy Bell to allow the tribal warriors to control the power of the fiends. In the end, they were stopped by the Van Cleef father and daughter and the Alliance agents. Before this, Vanessa had asked Duque, "Why are you acting like this when you clearly want to see Brainless Howl cause trouble and can't wait for him to become Yashaji's biological son?" This was Duke's reply, "Alas. It would be too fake if the Alliance did nothing. Politics is so hypocritical. Just treat it as striking a monk for a day. Oh no, you're wrong. Just treat it as striking a monk for a day." Duque's words were very zen like the Pandaren, but because of his ignorance, Vanessa laughed. "All right, my dear master, I will obey your orders. But you owe me a favor, okay? Aren't you my maid? What do you mean by asking for favors when you work for master?" Duque pretended to be angry. "Since I've served you for so many years, just promise me. When we're done with the Burning Legion, I'll make another small request." Okay." Duque scratched his head. Unknowingly, Vanessa had also served him as a maid for 30 years. If not for the eternal blessing, she would have given him all her youth. From this point it seemed like he really owed her a little. Duque did not think too much and casually agreed. There was no doubt about the skills of the Van Cleef father and daughter. They succeeded. The enraged Gurus destroyed the Holy Bell. It turned out that in history the Holy Bell had smashed little Anduin to the brink of death. But in this life, there was no place for little Anduin to appear. There was no other way. Duque could not possibly let little Anduin go knowing that something would happen, right? Speaking of which, William had the intention to groom his son. Hence, under Duque's instigation, little Anduin followed Old Chin everywhere. Of course, Duque arranged for Khadgar to monitor the whole process. In addition, Old Wa sent out his rumored harem and real teammate Valera. After greeting Old Chin, she stealthily followed Old Chin. It could be considered as training for little Anduin. Duque did not think much of it. After all, in Duque's opinion, if the Alliance really handed over the baton to little Anduin, the dirty priest who played mass resurrection on the battlefield, the world would definitely be at peace. On the other hand, the first emperor of the ancient demons, the god of thunder, had returned to his former palace, Thunder King Island. He gathered the scattered ancient demons' tribes and planned to reunite the chaotic and divided Pandaria. The huge fleet of the Zandala trolls had tamed many powerful primitive beasts on Giant Beast Island, which was originally part of the South Sea, and landed on Thunder God Island. The Zandala trolls had also brought their allies, the elite and powerful priests and rulers of the forests, jungles, deserts, and frost trolls, to help the god of thunder conquer Pandaria. In addition, the Zandala trolls had also invaded the various coastlines of Pandaria. They went to the northern island of Pandaria, Giant Beast Island, originally part of the South Sea, and tamed the powerful wild beasts there to fight for them. After learning about the rise of the god of thunder and the Zandala trolls, Zhu Talan hesitated for a long time. Little Anduin, who was listening at the side, was a little puzzled. Actually, why don't we let the Alliance enter Pandaria? Many things would be easily solved. That's right. In the face of absolute power, tricks were meaningless. Zhu Talan had a different opinion. He said to little Anduin, "Child, you can think about it. Your uncle Marcus has extraordinary power. Why doesn't he just flatten the whole of Pandaria? He has the ability to do so." The little prince fell into deep thought. After a while, Zhu Talan said, "This is justice. If you're right, you can go anywhere. If you're not, you can't go anywhere. Relationships that are maintained purely through violence are destined to not last long." Chapter 1946. In Naxxramas, in the secret room that could monitor little Anduin's condition, Onyxia, who was in human form, made a threatening gesture after seeing this scene. She yelled indignantly. Taking the side of reason? Bullshit. Our Duque doesn't need to reason with the enemy. He'll just kill you as soon as he shows up. He won't stop until the enemy is dead. That's how Duque treated me back then. He never reasoned with me before he killed me. He turned around and added, "Am I right? Duque." Duque rolled his eyes. "Silly dragon, please watch your words. If I stood in front of you as a mortal, are you sure you wouldn't eat me?" "I won't." Onyxia was absolutely certain. "What?" Duque was curious. "You're too skinny. You'll get stuck in my teeth." The black dragon pretended to be deep in thought. "I'll probably slap you to death." Duque was a little angry. He slapped the dragon's butt. "You're asking for a beating, aren't you?" Almost at the moment of being hit, Onyxia subconsciously stuck out her dragon butt. Only then did she realize that Duke wasn't trying to tame a dragon. This was a little awkward. It had become a habit. Onyxia wanted to lower her back down, but found that the dragon-taming whip was quickly pressed against the dragon's cave. "Since it's like this, let's just do it." Duque put his hands on the dragon's waist. There was a small twist in history. It was supposed to be Zhu Talan who formed the Shadow Raid Battalion and led the elites to Thunder God Island. Although there weren't many of them, they hid in the dark and successfully thwarted the Thunder God's plan. The biggest variable was William's attack on Little Anduin. Perhaps Zhu Talan was moved by Little Anduin's sincerity, or perhaps Zhu Talan had a mysterious confidence in the skills of his elite team. Zhu Talan actually let a holy priest sneak around. Even the term pig-like teammate was not enough to describe Little Anduin in this state. He was like a lighthouse in the dark. Not only did he emit light and heat, but he could also be easily spotted from a few kilometers away. First, the Shadow Raid camp had been discovered. Then, another piece of news forced Zhu Talan to withdraw the rest of his men. The main force of the Shadow Trace sect was gone, but at this moment, the army of the tribe seemed to have received some news and actually charged straight towards the Jinxiu Valley. No one knew better than Zhu Talan what was in the Splendid Valley. As the suzerain of the Shadows Talk faction and the guardian of Pandaria, Zhu Talan made a risky and somewhat idiotic decision. He asked the Alliance to take care of Thor while he gathered all the Pandaren who could fight and went to the Splendid Valley to stop the Horde's advance. When the Alliance received the news, many Alliance generals didn't understand. Only a portion of them kept silent. Are those Pandaren stupid? They know that the Horde is stronger, and they might not be able to stop them with just their own people. Why didn't they ask the Alliance to join in? Onyxia, whose face was flushed after being tamed, said with her hands on her hips. Duke shrugged. Let's put it in a way that you can understand. Let's say that you know that someone is going to raid your old home in Dustwallow Swamp. You know that the other party is probably as strong as your dead father, and that there's a very strong external aid that you don't have much contact with. Would you trust yourself or would you look for external aid? The Black Dragon Princess brain was stuck. Perhaps it was stupid, but it was not difficult to understand. However, since Zhu Talan had made such a decision, the Alliance, which had a policy of not interfering with the internal affairs of the Pandaren, was happy to comply. On the other hand, the Pandaren had officially made a diplomatic request, hoping that the Alliance would help to destroy the Thunder God on Thunder God Island. What made Duque the most was that this request was not just the will of Zhu Talan or the Shadows Talk Monastery. Now, the leaders of the Pandaren temples had a joint request. The White Tiger Temple, the Green Dragon Temple, the Five Dawn Temple, the Red Crane Temple, the Thunder Palm Pavilion. There were no less than 10 Pandaren organizations, big and small. Although not all of them, considering the sacred status of the Pandaren temples in the hearts of the Pandaren, this was already an important consensus reached by Zhu Talan and the Pandaren in a short period of time. Duque raised his eyelids, looked at the main reports and said to Bulang Bronzebeard, "Clean up Thunder God Island." Clean up? Will it? After working together for almost 30 years, Bulang naturally understood what Duque meant. It's okay. Our enemies will soon give us divine assistance. Duque simply closed his eyes. It turned out that in history, with the help of the Shadows Talk faction, the Alliance and the Horde landed on Thunder God Island from two directions. After establishing their respective forward bases, the Alliance and the Horde broke through the walls of the Thunder Throne, raided Zendala's dock, and the Ancient Devil's Mine, and finally broke through the solid gate of the Thunder Throne. In the process, both the Alliance and the Horde paid a terrible price in human lives. At that time, when the Alliance and the Horde were fighting, their long-range weapons not only hit the Thunder God's people, the Zandala trolls, but also each other. They were practically surrounded by enemies on all sides. What was even more disgusting was that the wretched swamp was right in the middle of Thunder God Island. This disgusting terrain forced both sides to give up on heavy equipment and even mounts, and only relied on the most primitive infantry to fight. The terrible loss of human lives in the process of battle disgusted the commanders of both sides. In the end, the Alliance and the Horde had no choice but to reach a temporary settlement at the gate of the Thunder Throne under the persuasion of Zhu Talon. Even after William returned to Stormwind City, he was shocked by the astronomical amount of compensation. Duque had no intention of sacrificing the precious lives of the Alliance soldiers. He decided to directly resurrect them and feel good about himself, thinking that he was the world's first Thunder God, and that he was going to have a fiery party. At that moment, because the Shadow Raid camp had been discovered and alerted the enemy, both the Zandala trolls and the Ancient Devil were on high alert. However, the same thing was reflected in thousands of pairs of eyes. Tens of thousands of cannonballs whistled through the air and arrived in the blink of an eye from the distant horizon. Most of these primitive races had never seen cannonballs before, and the dazzling rain of cannonballs poured down directly in front of them. Boom, 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 boom. Along with the continuous loud noises, the seemingly never-ending flashes of explosions spread from west to east along the central axis of the entire island to the other side. Countless soil and huge stone slabs that humans couldn't even reach with their arms spread out were lifted from the ground. Countless trolls, ancient devil, and deformed monsters created by the Thunder God screamed and tried to dodge the fatal rain of cannonballs, but in the end they were still caught up by the flashes of explosions. Chapter 1947. An unlucky demon ancient warrior was sent flying by the shockwave of the shell explosion. He was thrown dozens of meters away and landed heavily on the ground. In midair, he had already become a matchstick that had been broken into several pieces. It was obvious that he would not survive. The other Zandalar troll's head was sliced in half by a flying tile. The regenerative ability that the trolls were so proud of did not come into play at all. The Zandalar troll was blasted a few meters away and turned into a corpse before it even hit the ground. The southwest part of Thunder God Island, which was lower in altitude, was designed to be a quagmire for the invaders. The Palace of Thunder God, the Throne of Thunder, was located in the northeast. The incompetent invaders, limited by the terrain, had no choice but to launch desperate and futile attacks from the quagmire to the tall city walls. It should have been like this. The unreasonable Alliance cannon array ignored this point and directly used a storm of steel and gunpowder to set off a one-sided massacre on the entire island. Hard granite bricks 2 meters wide, 1 meter high, and half a meter thick could not withstand this terrible cannon storm. Even the aftermath of the large-caliber cannon was enough to blow all the nearby warriors away. The temple, which had a very classical and rough style, was like the purple-black sky in the sky, groaning in the cannon fire. The thinner buildings were directly uprooted. The violent explosion caused the walls of the palace to easily loosen and collapse. The roof directly disintegrated into countless fragments, like a sand fortress violently smashed by a baseball bat, easily exploding and scattering. There was no creature that could survive a 460mm caliber main cannon. Not the trolls, not the demons, not even the deformed monsters created by Thunder God. These red and black deformed monsters that looked like meatballs wriggling on the ground took a shot from the 203mm cruiser's main cannon. The tentacles that extended from the meatballs seemed to swell up, and then they exploded like meatballs that had been pissed. Instantly, flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The smaller tentacles were directly blown to smithereens, and the thick broken limbs were blown into the sky. After the 460mm main cannon, it was the even more terrifying Gustav-class railway gun. Railway guns of more than 800mm were moved out from the depths of Naxxramas through the railway tracks, revealing their huge muzzles in the direction of the target. It was just a single shot, but it was like a huge hammer smashing a brick. The soil around the entire lightning throne was blasted to pieces. It was like a huge shovel specially used by gods had dug up a huge piece of soil at the edge of the lightning god island, exposing the main structure of the divine hall below to the sky. After 2 rounds of cannon fire, the sand settled down, and the Alliance's scanners, radars, and optical telescopes were all deployed. The battle situation had changed from an omnidirectional attack to a precise attack. Some of the mutants that did not know what to do had just crawled out of the mud and were hit by the cannons of the Alliance battleships that had been waiting for a long time. For the cannoneers of the Alliance, who had long since made arrangements to divide the battlefield, they only needed to move their cannons a few centimeters to fire. A ball of fire struck the mutated monster head-on, and amidst a blood-curdling screech that caused the surrounding space to tremble, the lump of meat completely exploded, turning into blood and minced meat that filled the sky before finally falling down in a swirl. Small-scale bloody rain continued to fall everywhere. The most important thing was that the Thunder Throne, which had once been the pride of the Devil Ancients, had completely disappeared from the Lightning God Island. The terrible cannons covered and flattened the entire island, blowing up every building on the island and turning them into rubble and powder. This was not the end. A huge floating island was descending from the clouds. There were towering round towers of various sizes on the island. The towers were slender, and the decorations on the spherical towers were mainly white with a lot of gorgeous purple and bright red. This was the other mobile air fortress of the Alliance, and one of the core kingdoms of the Alliance, the Dalajan. The Dalajan's arrival was completely without warning. If Zhu Talan were here, he would certainly be surprised why it was not Naxxramas, but a magic flying city that he had never seen before. In fact, it was Naxxramas that was 10 kilometers away. It was just the Dalajan that had come. This was not important. A phoenix as hot as the sun appeared. It let out a clear and melodious cry and proudly took the lead from the airport platform on the side of the Dalajan. Beside him were thousands of pure-blooded firehawks that looked like large fireballs, as well as thousands of fire elemental creatures. One by one, the inverted triangular fire elemental creatures descended from the sky and directly broke through the passage of the Thunder Throne. The phoenix flapped its wings and hovered over the Lightning God Island. Its crimson eyes were like a pair of small erupting volcanoes, constantly emitting flames. Its sharp eyes were filled with a kind of pride as the master of all living things, looking disdainfully at the world. It and its master, the demigod Kale, that's Eversong, calmly looked at the island, but it gave others the illusion that these two pairs of calm eyes were looking down at their new territory from above. The Lightning God Island was not big, about 3 kilometers long and 1.5 kilometers wide. Not a bad island. It's suitable to be the new base of the Alliance. His mount, the Phoenix AO, was several times larger than it had been in Draenor. Now, its huge body was almost half the size of a town, and the flowing flames under its wings easily brought out clouds of fire with a temperature of at least 3,000 degrees. This terrifying temperature alone was enough to melt gravel into glass. The turbulence set off by the Phoenix when it flapped its wings was like the sweat of humans working casually. But after such a spark-like light fell on the Lightning God Island, the entire area was plunged into a sea of fire. The terrifying sea of flames burned and purified everything on the island. This place is too dirty. I'm going to purify it for my master. Kale, that did not say this publicly, but he did it. For a full half an hour, Kai Z ignored the provocative roars coming from the depths of the Lightning Throne and continued to burn the place with flames. When everything was over, Kai Z raised his eyelids. What's the hurry? I'll deal with you now. The Phoenix descended magnificently. The moment the Phoenix landed, a huge portal surrounded by flames opened behind Kai Z. 2 fire elemental leaders, nearly 10 stories tall, walked out from inside. The fire elemental fighter, Smodron, and the fire demon hunter, Sharnox, appeared with 2 molten fire hounds. It was not only them. From the Dalajan, an equally burly figure descended, riding an unbelievably large progenitor dragon. Alder's guardian of thunder, Tarim. Following Tarim were the 2 guardians of Alkavan, Coralon, and Amaron. Of course, because these big guys were too huge, it was easy to ignore them. In fact, the Alliance Marshal Gavin Rat also came down with a few second-rate powerhouses. Chapter 1948. Kaizi smiled. Is everyone here? Let's begin. The Alliance had many strong people and there were many cards that they could play. There was no need for Duque to lead the team personally every time. For the purpose of making use of resources, Duque would let the Guardians work as long as he found a suitable excuse. There was a special existence in the Thunder Throne of Thunder God Island, Guardian Laden. Since it involved a Guardian, it must be another depravity drama. Tarim, who had been sold by Wisdom Loken once, hated betrayal and depravity the most. After some stupid dragon died, Tarim did not need to defend Otter. Under Du's instigation, he began to participate more in fighting against evil. For example, this time he came to be a thug again. It turned out that in history the troublemaker Black Dragon Prince Lachio had gone to the Thunder Furnace on Thunder God Island and learned that the ancient devils had the powerful technology left behind by the Titans. He used the equipment to forge a sharp halberd and then collected the power of thunder from the Storm Dragon King's corpse. Lachio sent people to continue investigating the Thunder Throne and collect the stone slabs left behind by the Titans. Finally, he understood the mission and origin of the ancient devils. In this life. Sorry I gave Lachio a cold song long ago. In fact, the ancient devils were once a pile of decorative stone statues in the experimental field of Pandaria. Under the effects of the curse of flesh and the spring water of Splendid Valley, they woke up and became flesh and blood, gaining life. The ancient devils who called themselves the Thunder God were not that great. 13,000 years ago, the Thunder God was just the son of a warlord. His goal was not only to conquer the weak races like his ancestors, but also to build a true empire. In order to achieve this goal, he traveled to the mysterious Peak of Thunder to search for the forgotten truth about the ancient devils and their power. He found something that opened his eyes: the Titan guardian Layden, who guarded the powerful Titan artifact, the Narek Fiend Engine. The Thunder God controlled both and then used this new power to proclaim himself the King of Thunder. He ruled Pandaria with tyranny until his death. Now he was resurrected and wanted to cause trouble again. Even though the powerful Zandala trolls and ancient devils had set up layers of defense in the Thunder Throne, the ferocious beasts hidden in the underground caves of the palace, and the monsters left behind by ancient devils' dark magic lurked in the palace sewers. But so what? The group of fire element demigods led by Kai Z were enough to give them a hard time, not to mention Tarim and the other guardians to hold the fort. Most importantly, Duque had been using this method to emphasize the justice of the alliance among the guardians. Look, our alliance has killed another evil one and saved a fallen guardian. Under the imperceptible influence of day after day, the guardians had long regarded the alliance as a complete partner of justice, unknowingly tying themselves to the alliance. Someone who went against the alliance? Of course it was an evil force that had to be destroyed. This gorgeous lineup had easily defeated the Thunder God without the help of the Shadow Tracking Sect. They had even defeated the Berserk Guardian Layden. With the approval of Tarim and the other guardians, the alliance not only obtained the spoils of war from the boss, but also the Thunder God's heart. This heart originally belonged to Guardian Layden, and the alliance was able to understand a key secret about the Titans. On this side, the Lightning God Island still had an unknown Lightning God and a fallen guardian. On the side of the Giant Beast Island, it was a complete annihilation. Without the annoying fog, there was no need to defend the dangerous caves that were getting deeper and deeper. Who knew why the Zandala trolls had trained so many giant beasts? To add food to the Alliance's soldiers? They had tested it out. The Velociraptor meat on the Giant Beast Island was not delicious. It was too tough. Unless it was the orcs with good teeth, no one would like that barbaric taste. In front of the Alliance's flying fleet, the army's cavalry, be it the Velociraptor Knights or any other knights, was a tragedy. The rarest thing was that there were no Pandaren living on the Giant Beast Island. Without worrying about friendly fire, the Alliance's fleet madly poured out the old-fashioned cannonballs they had accumulated over the past 10 years. Cannonballs were like that. Once they expired, they would be dangerous and detonation would cost money. If they could not get rid of them within their expiration date, it would be a waste. Just like the Celestial Empire, in order to prepare for emergencies, they followed the Russian standard and prepared 7.62mm bullets in units of hundreds of millions. The specific number was not something we commoners could know. We only knew that there were about 30 billion rounds. The Alliance's stockpile of cannonballs was also awesome. There were more than 200 million rounds. There was no way around it. Any main cannon had about 100 rounds of ammunition. A warship had a main cannon and a secondary cannon. The 460mm main cannon was matched with a 155mm cruiser-class secondary cannon. According to this ratio, no matter how stingy they were, they had to prepare more than 2,000 rounds of cannonballs of all sizes. The Alliance now had nearly 10,000 large and small warships in the air and on the sea. 200 million rounds of ammunition was definitely not a small number. This was only because Duque had considered that cannonballs would be consumed quickly and that they would be innovated quickly. Even so, the cannonballs that were about to expire were always a headache for the Alliance military. Now the problem was solved. While Naxxramaz's air force attacked Thunder God Island, the Alliance's fleet also attacked Giant Beast Island, as well as the Zandala fleet in the northeast corner of Pandaria, east of Kunlai Mountain. The fleet commanded by Zul was nothing but huge. The wooden ships were no different from target ships in front of the Alliance's warships. No, it should be said that when the Alliance's gunners trained, they used obsolete wooden warships as target ships. The only difference was that there would be no people on the target ships, while the Zandala fleet had a large number of troll sailors. There's no suspense in killing them. It's like fighting primitive people. In the magnified image of the magic mirror, Admiral Taylor sighed as he watched the troll being blown away. 30 years ago we were also primitive people like this, Bulang Bronzebeard said directly in the magic communication. Yes, thanks to our leader we evolved from primitive times to modern times. Taylor, a man in his 40s and 50s, felt the changes in the human world the most. In just 30 years they had crossed the age of steam from the feudal era and entered the quasi-modern era. That was exactly the time it took for Taylor to go from a teenager to a middle-aged uncle. He was filled with emotion. Just as the Alliance's army quickly finished bulldozing the three places, Duque suddenly heard a voice. Hello? Is this Mr. Duke Marcus? I have something to talk to you about. His fluent Chinese seemed to echo in her ears. Miraculously, Duque was in the secret room of Naxxramas. Duque's heart moved. He knew who was calling him. Chapter 1949. At Duque's level there were not many that could threaten Duque. There were many capable people in the world of Azeroth, and there were many that were worth looking up to or being wary of. When it came to Pandaria, there were only two existences that could make Duque take them seriously. One was Yashaji and the other was this one. Duque stood up, patted his clothes and gestured, "Be serious." The Black Dragon Girl and Vashj, who had been a bit lazy a moment ago, immediately became serious, and tidied up Duque's clothes in an orderly manner. Duque easily crossed the teleportation gate, and in the next second he appeared on Mount Kunlai's clear sun peak. It was not as cold as Northrend, but standing on this snow-covered peak of Pandaria, he could still feel a chill. The cold was meaningless to Duque who had a demigod body. Moreover, as the elemental lord, Duque could control any of the four elements in the world of Azeroth at will. The ice elements here had only sensed Duque's presence, and they had already cheerfully lingered around Duque, forming a small ice tornado. But this ice tornado was very slow, and the dust and snowflakes carried by the wind could be easily seen with the naked eye. Duque did not care about the situation of the elements. From the start, all his attention was attracted by the old panda man, who was leaning on a walking stick, had a kind face, and had extremely long white eyebrows and beard. He clearly looked like an old panda man, but even though he was a little hunchbacked, the natural aura he exuded made it seem as if he was one with heaven and earth. Duke could not help but raise his eyebrows. Normally, every animal that was independent of the natural environment of a planet would have an aura that was completely different from plants. This person's aura was not like that of an animal at all. No, it was not even like that of a living creature. Yet, it gave Duque a natural and harmonious feeling. Oh ha! Mr.'s ability to control the elements is indeed amazing. That's great, please forgive this old man's impetuousness. If you're in the mood, why don't you sit down and have a cup of tea then listen to this old man's story? The old Pandaren grinned. Then, as if he was performing a magic trick, he conjured two mats, a short tea table and a tea set. Honored guest, please take a seat. Of course, he didn't want to sit cross-legged or spread his legs and directly sit down. If Duque did this, the other party would not blame him, but would treat him as a foreigner. As a transmigrator from the modern world, Duque knew the rules. He just didn't want to do it. In the end, Duque still did as the Romans do. Kneel down. It was a very heavenly style of sitting. Although this was Duque's first time doing this, he had watched so many period dramas, and he had the systems help to replay the scenes. Moreover, after obtaining the body of a demigod, he had amazing control over his own body. As a result, Duque was able to sit up properly. Oh, esteemed guest, you seem to have a deep understanding of the panda people's culture? The old panda man asked with a smile. A little. Duque said humbly. The old Pandaren didn't point it out and began to make tea. It was a little different from the way Duque knew how to make tea. The old Pandaran's way of making tea was more old-fashioned. It was obviously the simplest way to wash a cup with boiling water, but under the huge black bear's paw, it was unusually light and graceful, like a white crane taking a bath. The tea powder that had been ground was scooped out of the teapot with a spoon. As soon as the teapot was opened, a faint fragrance could be smelled. After picking out a small amount of tea powder, he poured it into the teacup, mixed it with a small amount of boiling water, and mixed it into a sticky paste. Then he picked up the teapot and poured some tea into the teacup. The whole set of actions was done smoothly and harmoniously. As Duque sat there, it was as if he was watching a godly performance. Not long after, the tea bowl in front of Duque, with a diameter of 15 centimeters, was filled with a bowl of evenly colored, gently swirling tea. Please, Duke held the teacup with both hands and placed it in front of him. He used a small amount of wind elemental energy to gather the aroma of the tea into the breeze and send it into his nose. At first, the fragrance was strong, but after a long time, there was a lingering fragrance lingering in the nasal cavity. This feeling was very magical. First smell, then taste. It really was the best. Before Duque crossed over, he was a boor. Tasting tea was not a skill that a college animal should have. He couldn't tell what was good about it. This kind of tea that left a lingering fragrance in the mouth and teeth was definitely not a lie. The old man's tea is very good. Duque made such an evaluation after searching through his barren tea ceremony memory. Oh he. If I didn't specifically understand your origin, I would be more willing to call you Mr. Du according to the Pandren's custom, because I always feel that your surname should be Du and your name should be Ku. The old Pandaren said with a smile. Of course, if you think this is offensive, can I continue to call you Mr. Marcus? Duque, who was mentally prepared, didn't have the slightest psychological fluctuation. He took a sip of tea indifferently, put down the teacup with both hands, took out a handkerchief, wiped the tea on the corners of his mouth and then spoke. A name is just a code. Since Emperor Xiaohao is an old senior from 10,000 years ago, then whatever you call this junior is willing to accept it. That's right. The old Pandaren in front of him was actually the last Pandaren Emperor, Xiaohao. Some people might ask, isn't Emperor Xiaohao dead? In the magical world of Azeroth, corpses could be resurrected after death, and ancient gods could come back to life after death. Emperor Xiaohao could split the entire continent and cover all of Pandaria with a fog 10,000 years ago. Did such a blockhead guy really not leave a will after death? Dumuk was the first to not believe it. Emperor Xiaohao smiled. If it weren't for your decent appearance, I would think of you as a Pandaren with the most complete and great inheritance. You flatter me. You're the panda. Your whole family are pandas. Bah. Why does it feel like I'm not scolding people? Duque, who was complaining in his heart, suddenly lost his temper. You and your alliance are too powerful, so powerful that even my clansmen and I are incomparably fearful of you. Regarding your invitation to us Pandaren to join the alliance, my people and I have to be cautious. After all, it's easy to join a powerful cross-racial alliance. Swallowed to the point that not even the bones are left. Duque smiled. It seems that you really understand Pandaren culture. This is what I'm most gratified about. Our Pandaren's customs and living habits are quite different from the existing races in the Alliance. There are countless powerful races in Pandaria. My ancestors and I spent countless years but failed to integrate them into an equal and peaceful organization. Differences in culture and ideology are the most likely to cause conflicts and even wars. Emperor Xiaohao sighed. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.